Welcome to the Explainer. We're doing something a little bit different today, and honestly, I think it's absolutely fascinating. We live in this era where we're all just constantly consuming or even creating digital imagery every single day. But how often do we actually stop to look at the code beneath the canvas? Well, today, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to meticulously deconstruct a single, incredibly brief, yet super densely packed 25-word visual description. And you might be wondering, why? Because we really want to see exactly how language constructs hyper-specific imagery in our modern digital era. We're literally putting these words under a microscope to uncover the hidden architecture inside a single sentence.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the source text in its entirety. It reads, Divine Radiance, the Savior in the clouds. Jesus Christ walking through heavenly clouds with golden sunlight, peaceful atmosphere, cinematic lighting, ultra-realistic, emotional, 4K vertical. Just let that wash over you for a second. It's only 25 words long, but the sheer density of that description is just staggering. It's an entire world, a highly specific mood, and a really rigid technical specification, all compressed into one single breath. Let's start tearing it apart.
Section 1. Decoding the Divine Radiance, peeling back the layers of visual language. To really do this text justice, we're going to use a quick decomposition framework to isolate the variables. We want to deeply analyze the weight, the purpose, and the function of each individual word here. We aren't just reading a sentence today. We're essentially reverse engineering a visual blueprint.
Moving to our next part, the subject and the setting, establishing the baseline imagery. Because before we can add the stylistic paint, we need the canvas and the subject. Let's move to and see how this builds, by starting with the grand, sweeping spiritual imagery that forms the core action of the text.
Let's isolate our anchor text right here. Jesus Christ walking through heavenly clouds. If we strip away all those fancy aesthetic modifiers, all the adjectives, this is exactly what we're left with. By focusing strictly on this raw subject in the environment, it puts the baseline action into sharp focus for us. It's dynamic, right? The subject is walking through, and it's immediately recognizable. You can think of this as the structural steel of our 25-word skyscraper. Everything else that follows in the text is designed entirely to serve, shape, and elevate this single foundational image.
Next up, sculpting with cinematic light, dictating tone and atmosphere. Because let's be real, an image is nothing without mood. And the text doesn't stop at just handing us the subject. It rapidly shifts from establishing what we're looking at to aggressively dictating how we should feel while looking at it.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how these phrases, cinematic lighting and golden sunlight, aren't just pretty words thrown in for poetic flavor. No, they're highly specific, functional instructions commanding exactly how the light should visually operate in this constructed space. Golden sunlight adds literal warmth and a very specific color temperature to the scene, likely placing it right at that majestic golden hour. Cinematic lighting dictates a deliberate use of shadow, contrast, and depth, which takes the scene from a simple, flat illustration to a sweeping, dramatic, high-budget production. They are incredibly precise aesthetic directives.
So the crucial point is to look at this stack of atmospheric modifiers: peaceful atmosphere, ultra-realistic, emotional. Just think about the heavy lifting these specific words are doing. They're sculpting the exact emotional resonance of our foundational subject. The text demands that the scene not only look a certain way, but physically feel a certain way to you, the viewer. Peaceful counters any potential chaos of the swirling clouds. Emotional commands a visceral, internal reaction. And ultra-realistic grounds this inherently ethereal, divine concept in a tangible, almost photographic reality. It's this fascinating tug-of-war between the spiritual unknown and the hyper-real.
Which brings us to our final layer, the technical constraints, formatting the divine vision. And just like that, the rules of the text change entirely. We're stepping right out of those warm, ethereal clouds and right into the cold, hard logic of modern digital consumption. We are shifting away from deliberate spiritual scene setting and moving straight into crisp, modern, technical directives.
Which leads us to a highly specific, almost jarring question. How is this divine vision actually formatted? I mean, we've built the heavenly subject. We've carefully lit the scene with cinematic precision. We've dictated the exact human emotion. But what is the actual physical container for all this boundless spirituality? This right here is where the architecture of the text reveals its ultimate, most fascinating twist.
And this brilliantly illustrates the modern paradox we're looking at. Notice the juxtaposition here. On the left side, we have all the ethereal elements: heavenly clouds, a peaceful atmosphere, an emotional core. It's this boundless, infinite, transcendent concept. But then, on the right side, we have the technical directives: ultra-realistic, cinematic lighting, and finally, 4K vertical. A profoundly spiritual, infinite scene is deliberately boxed right into a stark modern aspect ratio, because apparently, even heavenly visions need to look good on a smartphone. The source text doesn't just want to conjure the divine, it demands the divine be specifically formatted to scroll perfectly on a mobile phone screen in ultra-high digital definition.
It is such a striking contradiction, and it really perfectly encapsulates our current visual culture. Which leaves us with this final thought for today's explainer. When we envision the divine, a concept historically meant to be infinite, formless, and totally beyond human comprehension, why do we now demand it be ultra-realistic and perfectly formatted for 4K vertical screens? It's a profound shift in how we interact with the spiritual through the lens of modern technology. Thank you so much for joining me to deconstruct this tiny but mighty piece of text. Keep pondering those 25 words, and I'll see you in the next explainer.